Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic presentation. Hope everyone's doing good. It is Wednesday at about 10:33. So, yeah, another kind of crappy day here in the mid-coast. It's not raining at least, but it's pretty chilly and overcasty. It's supposed to eventually be nice, but this weather's been sucking lately. But anyway, hope everyone's doing good and watching plenty of movies. This weather is usually really good for napping and watching movies. So I I'm looking forward to this weekend. I think I'm gonna make another trek up to my favorite store, my home away from home. I'm gonna probably go up on Sunday this coming weekend. I'm gonna go back up to Bull Moose, get some movies. It's probably been about a month or so since I've been there, so maybe more. Always, trying to seek out new things. Again, when I go to Bull Moose, especially the one in Waterville, which is the closest one, I that's probably my favorite place. And it's a little bit of a hike. It's an hour away from here, but it's worth it. I take the back roads to Waterville and to Bull Moose, and it's a really actually the drive. I used to go stay pretty much on the highway, and I would go that way, and that would be a decent drive, but it takes about the same distance either way, maybe give or take 5 minutes. But the usual way I used to go would be on the basically get on the highway and follow Route One all the way up, and that would be kind of a boring drive. But then I discovered this other way of where one day I just decided to see if there's another route that I could take that could maybe be a little bit more fun or exciting. And I remember typing in the address in my GPS, and it took me through all these back roads. So now I go that way, and it's really cool. It's a real pretty drive. It's through this whole you go through this whole like kind of farming area and community in Freedom, and it's a real beautiful drive. It takes you past Unity. So I love going that way because it's a real beautiful drive. There's nobody on the road. You drive through all of these cool little farms that are out in that area. So all these nice fields, beautiful fields and valleys, and some really nice wooded areas. So I that's the way I go. So it's really a pretty drive. So I look forward to driving that way, and then driving obviously to Bull Moose. The other Bull Moose I really really love, but it's a little bit of a it's definitely a further drive. It's about an hour and 20 minutes or so. That location is the one in Brunswick. Brunswick is pretty awesome. That one has a really great selection. It's a little bit smaller, but they have a really great movie selection. Their music selection is really good too. If there's a chance, I might be down in Thomaston on Sunday, which is like almost halfway, kind of, sort of, maybe. So I might go from South Thomaston to Brunswick, but we'll see. Either way, I'm gonna probably go on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to that. And usually, when I go to that Bull Moose in Rockland, I'm sorry, in Waterville, or the one in Brunswick, I usually try to always focus on getting as many exploitation movies as I can get, and I try to seek out some of the more obscure movies, the most obscure movies I can find, really. Even if it's stuff, most of the stuff I end up getting are things that I've never seen before. And I usually really try to focus on beefing up my Mondo Macabre uh, movies. Mondo Macabre is my favorite label out there. They're just so awesome. They really take a seriously deep dive into the exploitation world. So, and it's been cool because over the last few years since I've really been stepping up and trying to beef up my collection, I've started to really discover and get more familiar with a lot of these different labels that are out there. You know, Mondo Macabro being probably my favorite, or definitely my favorite. Severin is an awesome label, really great. Blue Underground is fantastic. Some of Arrow's releases are really great. There's a there's a whole bunch of great labels out there that really specialize in the exploitation world. So now when I go to Bull Moose, it makes the whole kind of process a little bit easier. I'll usually one thing I do now that's a little bit different is I'll search by the labels and I'll go by what labels are putting out what, and usually like Severin and Mono Macabre especially and Blue Underground are just all awesome. So that makes it a lot easier for me to make decisions. And they always have tons of. I'm always surprised too. They always have tons of Mono Macabre there, which, again, it's such an obscure label. Uh, it's a popular label, like in the kind of underground circuit, but they're so prolific in the amount of movies that they put out. And there seems to be a real big buzz around that label. I listened to a podcast with some of the founders for Mondo Macabre, and it was really interesting and really kind of insightful. And I learned a lot from watching that. And their whole thing is these guys that run these labels, especially Mondo Macabre, they really are first and foremost fans of these films. It's not just it's a real labor of love because they're specializing in things that are pretty obscure and things that are not like readily available, things that were forgotten, and also things that you're not going to find anywhere else on the planet or in the planet. So it's great. It's very cool. So a lot of the times, if I see a movie and it just has their label on the side, I don't own it, I'll snatch it up. Because I one thing too, as a collector and as a film fanatic, and a person who watches movies all the time, I don't know how long this whole kind of ride is going to last. I don't know how long you know these these movies are going to be available in their physical form. So I just go for it. You never know; it could go away. I've noticed there's always a little bit of a weird flux here and there with availability. I've seen I've gone to those shops and I've noticed that their exploitation selection at times seems to be kind of dwindling down a little bit. But then I'll go the following month and I'll realize, oh wait, there's quite a bit of things here that I haven't seen. But so that is actually a real concern of mine that the stuff will go away. It could happen because you know part of me is like I don't know how these companies can really stay afloat given I know they have a rabid fan base, myself included, but we're we're pretty small like compared to people who buy, you know, bigger Hollywood based movies, which I still buy. And I usually when I buy those movies, I always buy them at the Goodwill in Rockland. They always have a great selection, so I'm always snatching up movies there. And I try to separate the two. Like when I go there, I'll just buy the more kind of bigger budget Hollywood films on Blu-ray because I love those too. But when I go to Blue Moose, I try to just focus on those. But it's great. It's super fun. So stay tuned. Probably by next week. Today is Wednesday. By next week, I'll have some more. I'll probably have some new films, and stay tuned for some reviews on those great films. So today is a show on a really great, well, I think one of the greatest action movies ever. It was the movie that introduced me to the one and only Sylvester Stallone, and that is First Blood. This was probably I have a copy of this great movie First Blood on DVD. I don't own it on Blu-ray, but this is a really great copy. I've had this version of it for geez, years and years. this was definitely a movie that one of the first like American action movies I saw as a kid. It was definitely the first movie I saw with Sylvester Stallone. I saw this before Rocky. This was definitely made me a fan of Stallone. This was, again, this was a movie I saw all the time as a kid. I, I, I definitely need to eventually get this on Blu-ray 4K. This version is actually really great. There's not a lot of special features on this version, but there's a really great, and I've listened to it a couple of times. There's an awesome commentary track by Stallone, and where he talks about all of the, all the behind the scenes things that happen for this great movie. And I think this is definitely, I do love Stallone, and there's this is also the First Blood is actually a giant franchise, and they're all pretty good movies. I would like to do a show on the franchise at some point. There was one that came out, I think, about, oh geez, I can't remember if it was maybe 8 years ago. That is just amazing, and that was kind of a revamp of the whole franchise. I think all the movies in the franchise are really great, but that one that came out about 8 years ago, which is one I really want to buy, is just unbelievable. Like the carnage in it is just kind of unparalleled. It's definitely one of the most badass movies, and that one is my second favorite behind this one. This one is just great though because it's got such a great cast. The suspense is wonderful. It's wicked old school 1982. It's hard to believe this came out in 1982. This came out after Stallone was pretty well known. Obviously after Rocky had come out and really set a high standard and put him on the map as a pretty creative force, or a real creative force in the world of action and for American films, and also just American films in general. This was directed by Ted Kotcheff. The story was David. The story was by David Morrell, and again, killer cast: Sylvester Stallone as John Rambo, Richard Crenna, the great iconic Richard Crenna as Sam Troutman, the wonderful Brian Dennehy, who I'm a huge fan of. He plays the sheriff. A huge fan of him. David Caruso, he's really awesome. This is one of the first films he was ever in. Jack Starrett, he's just another badass. Bruce Greenwood. Again, this movie has so much great suspense to it, and I love the cinematography for this film. I love where it's shot. I believe it was shot in Seattle, Washington, and the whole place basically takes place in this vast forest, and the action is just amazing. It's just tremendous. And this movie, considering that this came out in 1982, it still holds up so well. Like, again, it's full throttle. I think the story is actually really good. It's pretty straightforward, but it's got such great characters, and the action sequences are just amazing. I love the scene of where Brian Denny, who plays the sheriff, is trying to get John Rambo to leave the town, and he's Brian Dennehy's character as the sheriff. He's kind of like this. Well, he's a small town sheriff, but he's kind of like this, bully, and he's trying to intimidate John Rambo, and he's telling him, we don't accept people like you. You're a vagrant. You're like this weird homeless person, and you need to leave. We don't need people like you here. And so he's trying to like put pressure on him to get out of the town, and then eventually he tries to arrest him, and then he resists arrest, and then that kicks off the action for this movie, and there's this awesome chase sequence of where he basically gets he he breaks free. He is arrested, John Rambo, and he kicks everyone's ass in the police department, and then he escapes and he steals someone's motorcycle, and the police are hot on his trail, and they chase him throughout the whole town and then into the woods where the 90% of the movie takes place. And I just think it's one of the best car chase scenes ever. It's super thrilling, and I believe Stallone also did all of his own stunt work for this movie. Just awesome. And it's such a, the intensity for this film just gets increased frame by frame. And this was, definitely the movie that for me, put Stallone on the map as definitely like one of the premier, American action stars. After this film, his career just exploded. I mean, he was, especially in the '80s, and this came out in '82. So after this, when First Blood came out, obviously that launched the whole franchise. But his career exploded by that point, and he was making so many action movies at that time. Just amazing. One of the movies I really love by him also is Cobra, which is a little bit more of maybe not as popular, but I really love that movie. It's a real dark kind of action movie. But First Blood is like, that's my go-to, and as well as the more recent, which came out I think about 8 years ago now, the Rambo movie, and that is a killer movie. There's about I think there's about 5 movies in the entire franchise. It might be 5 or 6 actually. There was one that came out the year before last, which is okay, pretty decent. It's not as great as the one before that, but it's pretty decent. So there's like, I believe there's about probably at least 6 movies in the franchise, but I always go to First Blood. That's my go-to movie in the franchise. And like I said before, it's my favorite Stallone film that there is. It's his balls to the wall. It's super entertaining, super violent, super dark, and some of the best action sequences ever. The and the cinematography. I love the location of the film where it takes place in this really dark forest the whole time, and it's really beautifully shot. It's got great atmosphere, really well directed, just an awesome movie. So if you've probably most folks out there have obviously seen this movie, but this is a movie that you know is one of my all-time favorite action movies. And I did a show on Predator, the original Predator, a few weeks ago, which is my favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. This is probably my favorite Sylvester Stallone movie. You can't, got to give props, and I can't forget the love that I have for the American action movie, especially with the icons that we all know and love, like Schwarzenegger and Stallone. They really put American action on the map, and just classic movies. So First Blood is just a killer movie. I definitely need to get this film on Blu-ray or 4K at some point. I saw last year I saw a review of the 4K Blu-ray release on YouTube. A guy had just picked it up and did a really great review, and he said it's just stunning. So that's something that will have to happen in my travels at some point, but definitely the best in my book. So this is Jason Dean. So thanks again for supporting this channel, and keep the comments coming. I love interacting with other people, especially with some interactions I've had with some folks who have subscribed to this channel, especially with the recommendations that have been going back and forth with films that we might all have seen or we haven't seen. And I've had that interaction with a couple of folks who have been commenting on these videos, and they'll make some recommendations, and a lot of the times it's films I have not seen, and then I try to do the same thing, and I love that. That's just super cool. So thanks again. This is Jason Dean, and have a wonderful day. Peace.